This podcast is brought to you by Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate, powered by Kangaroo Fern Media Lab. Kangaroo Fern is Australia's independent video and podcast management agency with the mission to help individuals and entrepreneurs to start their own podcasts and harness the power of podcasting. Book now via www.kangaroofern.com.
A Kangaroo Fern production.
A Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate.
Thing we can do is just get stops and run. Stops and run, guys. Push, push, push every time.
Extra session with Kiko Malikdem tackles everything about the world of sports, especially the one close to the host's heart, basketball. Updates, discussion, clarification, name it, Extra Session has it. Extra session with Kiko Malikdem.
That's how they're getting their points. Rebound favors battles and gets it away from Bob Mote out the hill for three. Bingo.
Okay, good day, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of your favorite sports podcast Extra Session with Kiko Malikdem here in Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate, Philippines. Overall, this is Episode 30 of this podcast, and I would like to say thank you to everyone who has supported this show since the beginning. So happy 2021. Hope all is well, despite, the continued presence of the coronavirus. So today, we are very fortunate to have with us a renowned coach, and he has been in the basketball circles all throughout the world, especially here in Southeast Asia. He guided the Indonesian Warriors to the ASEAN Basketball League Championship back in 2012 and handled several teams, including Satria Muda, Macau, Wolf Warriors, and then he was also an active consultant of the Petron San Miguel team in the PBA. He also had an NBA experience under his belt, wherein he was video intern and video coordinator for the Sacramento Kings for 2 to 3 seasons. And he was also a national head coach for the Vietnam basketball team. Ladies and gentlemen, Coach Todd Purves. Coach, good day.
Kiko, thank you so much for having me, brother. I appreciate you. And I'm just blessed to be on here with you.
Okay, so how are you doing right now? Hope all is well. What's keeping Coach Todd Purves busy right now?
My spirits feel good, Kiko. My spirits feel good. I'm out here in California. As many of your viewers will know, this coronavirus has got things pretty roughed up out here. So we're grinding through it, but it's a fortunate time that I get to spend with some family, and I can't wait to get back out to Asia, Southeast Asia, and get to competing back to some basketball. In the meantime, I'm trying to, like everyone else, mitigate the events that we're going through.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. How did basketball become part of your life? Were you a player, or you actually ventured immediately into coaching?
I was a player, and I wasn't a particularly great player. I short guy. I'm only about. I'm a 5'8" dude about, and but I loved the game, and so I competed, and I liked to be physical. So I played mostly American football growing up, and played American basketball and baseball. But so going into it, I just loved competing and playing sports. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for me, God did not bless me with the abilities that you'd want to have to be a professional. So I'm not a tall guy. I'm not an athletic guy. I just love it. And so I learned to be a good player when I was a young man. And quite frankly, to be honest with you, Kiko, I think I knew in high school I was going to be a coach, or I wanted to be a coach, because I knew I didn't have those attributes to really be a legit player on a high level.
So who were your basketball idols, when growing up?
Oh, sure. When I was a real young man, my idol was Dr. J.
Wow.
Dr. J, in the early days, he brought a different type of style to the game that I thought was real cool. So I was just a young man, a kid, and watching and falling in love with the game. Dr. J was a big influence on me. I watched Larry Bird and Magic Johnson compete in my early days. And then once I reached about junior high school, Michael Jordan came on board, and that changed everything. So when Mike came on board, it was different. You watched Hakeem Olajuwon and some of the Rockets teams compete a little bit, but basically when Mike wanted to be in the NBA, he was just going to stack chips. And so, yeah, I was there to watch short shorts go to long shorts. I was there to watch the Jordan 1s become a cool basketball shoe. And I fell in love with it, bro. I really did. So, yeah, after that, I knew, well, I'm not a great athlete, but I might be able to coach. I don't know.
So, looking at your coaching resume, how you started, one thing that, that caught my attention actually was you became a part of an NBA team, which I said earlier, Sacramento Kings. How were you able to get into NBA? It's very hard to be part of any team.
I'll share the exact story with you, man. Here's what happened. We had a facilities manager. Mm-hmm. I don't want to put his name up there, but he was in charge of the facilities when I was coaching at Sacramento State University. Mm-hmm. Sacramento State is considered a mid-major because I think they don't have any, quote, low majors. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're a low major in Division I. Sacramento State, where I coached, did not have a great deal of success in terms of wins and losses. It's where I also went to school, but it's the truth. Nonetheless, I had an opportunity to coach there at my alma mater later where we got a little bit better. But we had a fellow who was in charge of the facilities. Mm-hmm. And this is a lesson that I'd like to share with your viewers or anyone else about. It's just how you treat the next man. And this man was in charge of turning on things like the heat and the lights and making sure the courts and facilities were always available for practice time or for game time and those types of things. And so we'd had a few experiences, he and I did, where things weren't.
Your podcast journey starts here. Take the first step on your side. Hustle with us. It starts with a great domain. Get your podcast web host with Beard and Coffee at www.beardandcoffee.com.au or find us at Facebook.
As prepared as I'd hoped they would be, and it trickles down. I was the low man on the totem pole on the coaching staff. So I'm the one who gets yelled at when they weren't prepared. But the facilities guy was the one in charge, and I always respected him. And I always knew he was working hard, even though mistakes might have been made here and there. So I never really got too upset at him. Well, coincidentally, what I didn't realize was also the facilities manager for the Sacramento Kings. And so he was also making sure that Arco Arena at the time was set up for the NBA games and all. And there were times where he and I could have maybe had disagreements, but you want to make sure that as a grown man, you keep all of your emotions kind of in check. Mm-hmm. And even when there were mistakes, we managed to work things out together. And I got a call one afternoon. I was having some sushi at my favorite sushi spot, with my uncle. And I got a call from this gentleman who said, Coach, I don't know if you know this, but I also am the facilities guy for the Sacramento Kings, and they need somebody to come in and be the head video scout. And I told him you might be able to do it. Nice. So that was the beginning for me. And the reason I told you this story, brother, was because there were a number of times where I felt frustrated with this particular individual and what he'd done, but I never lost my temper with him. I always knew that if I had to take the brunt of the gym not being ready, I was going to do that. But I always treated him with respect. And there were times where I was frustrated, but you still treat the next man with respect. And so eventually I got that phone call from this man who had watched out for me. Nice. And I'd known, I guess at that point, that thank God I never really snapped or got too angry at this man, because he looked out for me in the end, and he gave me an opportunity to go interview with the Sacramento Kings. And that was the beginning for me, just getting a foot in the door. And it came absolutely from the guy who opens the gym, takes out the trash, and does all the grimy things that you need to have done. And so he gave me that opportunity, and I respect him always.
Can you describe to me what does a video coordinator do? What's the main job that you do in
Yeah,
Sacramento?
it is a wonderful job, Kiko. It sounds like you're the guy. I realize for your fans, it may sound like the guy who puts the video clips that you see of highlights, and that's nothing about what it does. What the video scout does, and I went from being both what they call a video scout. I was then an advanced scout that goes on the road to see things. But the video scout is where I really feel like I got my education in basketball. I had already been a Division I coach. I had learned the basics of how to teach offense and defense at that level. But when I got to the NBA, it was a real revelation in terms of the nuanced differences, how quickly you can recognize defensive coverages or offensive sets. When you have a 35-second shot clock like the U.S. does in college, things take a longer time to develop. In the NBA, you get down there and in 2 or 3 seconds, they're already in the action that you want to get to. Whereas at the university level, it may take them 15, 20 seconds to get to that same action. So I felt like when I first went from the collegiate level or university level to the NBA, it was moving so fast, it was tough for me to recognize. And I was a little bit intimidated, if I'm honest with you, man.
I see. Now, of course, you do the video scouting. During your time, who was the toughest player to plan for a defense for the Sacramento Kings?
Hey, I'll tell you right now, Kiko, this is a real easy call for me. And you won't think it, or your viewers won't expect what I'm going to say. Because you'd think, listen, Kobe Bryant kicked our ass more times than I can even count. There is no coverage for LeBron James when you're that good. Some of these guys are so good, but in terms of the meeting, so when coaches are getting together and discussing what type of coverages you want to use, the most difficult player to prepare for, Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk Nowitzki was a 7-foot player. So, I mean, he wasn't the tallest player in the league at the time, but he's one of the tallest. And he might have been the best shooter in the game. So when you're talking about a guy that had that size and that shooting ability, in terms of coaching, the way you decide to guard it changes everything. And so we know what Kobe's going to do. You know what LeBron's going to do. You know you can't guard them if they've got the ball in their hand and they're going to take someone off the dribble. Everyone needs to hedge toward them. But when you're dealing with a guy who's 7'1" and the best shooter, it's a whole nother issue of defensive principles you have to think about. And so, yeah, it may sound crazy to your viewers, but I've been in those meetings and deciding, do you show on the pick and roll? Do you switch? Do you go under and stay with him? Those are the type of coverages that coaches are thinking through. And Dirk is just impossible because when the tallest guy on the floor is the best shooter on the floor, the coverage that you have to choose to do can be tricky from a coaching perspective. And it's different. Like I said, you can't guard LeBron and you can't guard Kobe because that's just who they are as players. But in terms of preparation, no one was worse than Dirk to prepare for because there's nothing you can do with a 7'1" guy who shoots threes that way.
Okay. So from the NBA, what made you decide to go to the other side of the world, which is Asia? Was it a hard decision for you to make, especially you are already in the NBA? And of course, was it a hard adjustment?
So I think there's a couple questions there, Kiko. The first is that in terms of making a decision, I had loved my time and enjoyed my time in the NBA. I had started out as the assistant video scout, become the video scout, and then what they call an advanced scout, where you travel before the team does to watch the team you're going to play in a couple of days. And I'd be happy to break that down for you as well. But that was the first part, is developing that skill set. Deciding to leave the NBA wasn't I was looking for a new adventure. I'm open. I was always open to see some other parts of the world. And to go to Indonesia from the NBA, it did sound like a bit of a crazy move. And I've spoken to some guys that I really trusted. At the time, there was an owner of the Philadelphia 76ers who's from Indonesia, as well as a mentor of mine who was one of the assistant owners of that Philadelphia 76ers team. And we worked together to try and kind of build something. And so heading out there, I was scared to death. I was scared. I had seen things on the news, and coming from America, I had all the apprehensions you can imagine. I really had those, and I was just mistaken. I got to Indonesia, and I was treated with kindness, and I was treated with respect. And there are obviously some cultural, religious, and every other kind of difference you can imagine. But my experience there was at the highest level, and I'm very appreciative of those Indonesian fans and people there.
I see. And then, like you said, you handled the Indonesia Warriors for the end. You guided them to an ABL championship. I mean, how were you able to get it? You know, was it? Do you believe it was just luck, or you consider your team a strong one?
I suppose it's always going to be a combination of those two. I was very fortunate, man. And my first year, I had a team that was able to win the championship there in the ABL.
Yeah.
I brought in a veteran in Steve Thomas, who was really the anchor of our team. He's become one of my best friends in life. So outside of basketball and fans everywhere, Steve and I talk all the time. We mostly talk about barbecuing, not about basketball, but I love the fact that we could talk about those times too, and we shared those times together. I was nervous, and I just did as best I could at the time. But what I didn't understand is this. I think I knew the game of basketball, Kiko. What I didn't know was the culture of Southeast Asia. So I went there thinking, okay, this is going to be right in my wheelhouse, and I was entirely mistaken. So I went there and realized I've got to do a whole lot of adjusting as a man, as a human being, and understand that I'm in a different culture and respect their culture and do everything outside of trying to beat my opponents. And so there was a combination of things to navigate at that point. And I think some guys were able to do it. And for some guys, it's too uncomfortable to be outside of that comfort zone.
I see. Now, when Indonesia Warriors won the ABL championship, you know, it started, you know, your name suddenly burst into the basketball scene in Southeast Asia. And then this was the time, you know, you were asked to go to the Philippines, right? How did you, you know, who and how were you able to, you know, enter the Philippine basketball?
So, Kiko, I'll be real honest with you, and I'm going to talk about some things right now for your viewers that can be maybe that they should receive as sensitive, because it was a good time for me and a difficult time in some ways. So, I was contacted by the Philippines after I'd won my first ABL championship in my first year as a head coach. Yeah. We went into the Philippines and we beat that team there. I think it was San Miguel Beerman.
Yes.
At the time, coached by Bobby Parks Sr., a friend of mine, rest in peace. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful competitor, and he and I were friends for a limited time, but had a real respect, and I appreciate him and his son very much so. And I'll reach out to Bobby Parks Jr. as well, let him know.
Are you a podcaster who's getting frustrated because your show results are not in your favor? Are you losing hope because you feel like podcasting doesn't help you generate income? Are you a podcast service provider who is struggling to meet your clients' expectations? If yes, head on to www.podkai.com. Book a call with the founder of Podkai Media, Kai Villanueva, and get clear and proven strategies to earn through podcasting.
To let him know my thoughts on his pops as well, man. He was just a wonderful dude and a real competitor. So that first year we competed. I was just lucky. We probably stole a championship there. And I was able to, start off my career on a good note. I had really players that were playing for me in Steve Thomas, in Evan Brock. And then we acquired a player named Stan Pringle, who you might be familiar with.
Yes.
And so I went out and found him. And certainly that behooved us in the first year or two.
And then, what do you think during your time? What do you think about what do you think of Philippine basketball in general?
It's unbelievable. It's so wonderful for me. I come from a country that loves sports, as you know. Here in the U.S., we just love to compete. American football might be the most popular, but we love basketball and baseball. We love it all, and so we're just real competitors. The Philippines, when I moved to Manila, it was the first time I think I'd lived in a country that basketball was their favorite sport.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, hold on though. Let me take a step back for you, brother, because when I was coaching in Indonesia with the Indonesia Warriors, we went to play at the time the Philippine Patriots. Mm-hmm. And so we were in the Philippines and we'd taken a taxi cab. And while we were taking the taxi cab, me and a player, it was Steve Thomas. Mm-hmm. And the taxi cab driver looked back at me in the Philippines, mind you, and he said, "Hey, you're the coach of the Indonesia Warriors." And people in Indonesia didn't know that, but people in the Philippines did. And it was because that's how popular basketball was there. And the guy caught me totally off guard. I was like, yeah, you're right. But it was because that's how much basketball meant in the Philippines. So this dude knew who I was for the other team, and people in that country didn't know who I was. So I remember we laughed about it a good while when we got back, but he knew exactly. We knew the Philippine people were serious about basketball, and it was absolutely wonderful. It really was.
So you handled the San Miguel or Petron, if I'm not mistaken. What was the name during that time? How prepared were you? Especially you entered the team that was kind of having some problems chemistry wise.
Yeah, that was an interesting endeavor for me. So I had been a head coach for 2 years. I'd left the NBA. I'd been a head coach for 2 years with Indonesia. Had some relative success, however you want to quantify that. But and then the Philippines brought me over there. San Miguel specifically, I think, felt, listen, Indonesia doesn't ever win here, and we did. So I was approached by the San Miguel Corporation at that point about joining them. They were very professional. I let them know that I had a contract in Indonesia, and they waited till it was done, and then they approached me, and they were very professional. I don't know exactly what the rules are specifically now relative to before, but you couldn't have foreign coaches, I think, as the head coach. They brought me in as a consultant.
Yes.
And I was just treated really well. I really was. So I have so much appreciation for the San Miguel Corporation and how they treated me. The dynamic of having to be a consultant as opposed to the coach was a little bit tricky for me. It was the first time I'd ever dealt with that type of dynamic. Mm-hmm. I was lucky to deal with, Gia Benila, Al Francis Chua, and I became good pals when I was there. I don't know if you know Al that well, but wonderful guy, and he and I had spent some time together. We didn't get to work on the same team. I think he was kind of working with Ginebra when I was working with what was Petron at the time, and then we bounced back to San Miguel. But a wonderful guy, and hey, maybe life gives us a chance to work together later. But I thought the world of him, thought the world of Gia Manila, Ramon Ang, who was the president and the CEO of the San Miguel team. I was really treated professionally there and absolutely loved it. I wanted nothing more than to bring them a championship.
Were you pressured when you entered the PBA? Do you feel any pressure at the time?
I think when you're a competitor, nobody really puts more pressure on you than yourself, and so I'm relentlessly on myself about what mistakes I made. I can come home after a win, and here's something I've gotten good at, brother. I don't read any media at all.
That's
in
good.
terms after my game. So I'll read it late, but I don't read media in terms of what happened in our game. I evaluate that. I'll talk to other coaches and such, but I would stay away from social media because that has a lot of people's feelings. And I love those feelings. I respect them. But I also know that if you want to be a professional sports coach, you better be thick-skinned and be able to make your own decisions on what you believe is best and what's best for those guys. And so the Philippines helped me get better at that, for sure.
If you were given a chance to grade your stint in the Pro League, in the PBA, how would you grade it?
Wow. To create a stint would be that's a real interesting question, bro. Yeah. I would say this. I wouldn't want to go into it being my third year as a head coach.
Yes.
The Philippines has had such a wonderful league, such a league with history. If I'm not mistaken, it's the second oldest league of the NBA, Professional Basketball League. Yes. And it has so many fans that I love so much. I wish I would have had maybe a little more experience and been a little bit older, so to deal with the social dynamics and some of the other parts that as a man I wasn't as familiar with. Mm-hmm. The basketball side I was probably pretty cool on, but I wish I could have been a little more experienced as a human being to enjoy everything I had around me, to accept that pressure and to do my best at it. I look back at it with such wonderful memories. The people that I met, the lessons I learned were incredible. You can't find a league like the PBA in this world. You just can't. And the passion they have is immeasurable. And I'm so thankful for it. I wish I was a little more experienced so I could have navigated some things better. But hey, that's part of learning to be a coach.
Yes.
And I take that.
After the Philippines, you resurfaced, correct me if I'm wrong, in Vietnam as the national team head coach, and of course for the Hanoi Buffaloes. Am I correct?
Correct. Yes.
So what were the challenges that you faced when you were given the task to handle it, those teams?
So I can tell you very specifically. I'll be honest with you, Kiko. When I left the Philippines, I anticipated. I'm tight with an ownership group here in the States that we anticipated was about to purchase an NBA team. Oh. And out of respect to them, I don't want to go into too many details, but we thought it was a done deal on one team, and as a backup plan, a second team. Mm-hmm. That was part of my departure in the Philippines, was very amicable with Mr. Ramon Ang, with all those guys who were running it. I thought I had something going, and it didn't come to fruition. Mm-hmm. And so there was another ownership group that bought that team, and so I'd wait a little bit. And I've got a couple of mentors out here whose advice I rely on. I'm getting old, man. I'm pushing 50. At 48, I should be the mentor. But at this point, I was probably relying on some cats to give me some advice. And they said, listen, if it doesn't work out right now, that you're going to go back, you're going to be a member of an NBA's front office management. You want to get your name back out there. So I had some contacts that actually hit me up that were in the ABL before. So the current, I believe the current CEO of the ABL is Connor Nguyen, and he was the general manager of the Saigon Heat at the time. Okay. And so we knew one another. when they were building a league out there, he'd reached out to me, and I thought, hey, this would be a cool endeavor to help build basketball in Vietnam. Now, and I'll be honest, Kiko, it was the least experienced level I've ever coached.
So you want to start a podcast, or perhaps you've already started one, but you're still unclear on how you can actually make this podcasting work. No worries. That's why we're here for you. We are Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate, powered by Kangaroo Fern Media Lab. Join our network. Contact us at info@kangaroofern.com, because we're stronger together.
So they didn't have the experience of the teaching that I was normally familiar with. But I'll tell you what, those fans were fired up, and they didn't know a thing about basketball, and they were cheering their asses off. And I really appreciated them. They were going nuts, even though they really didn't know the nuances, and I fell in love with it. So it was a wonderful experience. It wasn't an elite level experience for basketball, but I loved those people and those fans.
So if you were given a chance to be part, of the teams that you handled before, which team do you want to handle again?
Well, I mean, heck, man, that's a loaded question right there. I have a San Miguel team that I think has won like 87 straight championships since I left. So to say that I'd like to coach Junmar Fajardo and Chris Ross and Arwin Santos, and yeah, I think we were probably a couple of months away from doing something special. But hey, the man in me could not be happier for those guys. And Chris Ross and I talked. I brought him there to San Miguel when he was with another team, and I thought, defense wins championships. And at the time I thought, oh, this Chris Ross can't shoot a lick, but he'll defend anybody on the court. He's my kind of guy. And so, yeah, I brought him over, and now he can score. He can do some scoring now, and he and I have remained friends for a long time. But he's not the only one. I love and respect those guys. They've had success that I'm so happy for guys like G, Abanila. I'm happy for Leo, who was an assistant coach for me one year. We've competed against one another. There's a number of guys on that staff and team that I'm just so, I can't wipe the smile off my face for them. That's just the way it is.
So, for example, you were given another chance. Aside from San Miguel Beer, which team in the PBA that you would love to handle?
Oh, wow. So here's the thing. As a coach, I guess when you're doing a podcast, you want an honest truth is that I've been a hell of a lot better coach at bringing low-level teams to the playoffs and competing for a championship than I have as a coach who's coaching the most talented team. So I think I probably had the most talented team there in San Miguel. And we competed. We were a couple of minutes away from a championship or two, and we came up short. And so that's something that I've always known as a coach I need to get better at, and I'll continue to work on that. But I've looked at some of these other teams in the PBA who I think have a player or two who's good, but they may not be one of those big name teams. Okay. And I feel for them. I feel for their fans, and you and I both know there's a certain group of teams that tend to win an awful lot in the PBA. Yeah. So for me, if I had to do it again or do something different, I would want to work with a team that has never had those opportunities, that didn't necessarily have those resources, and that wanted to come from maybe one of the teams that had won lesser games to be a team that could compete is more in my neighborhood, bro.
So basically, looking back, I was wondering, it was Coach Todd, who planted the seeds. Remember, for the San Miguel to rise above once again, right?
Well, I don't take that type of credit, man.
Yeah.
I think before. When I took them over the previous year, they'd gone about 500. We were able to win some games, but to be honest, we weren't able to get over the top until Leo Austria took over.
Yeah.
And Leo was able to get that team over the top, and he deserves all the credit for it because, you have to do the things it takes to win championships, and that's what he was able to do, bro.
I see. Now, if you will be, battling, we'll talk about international basketball. Now, if you would be battling the Philippines or facing the Philippines in international basketball, which you have, what would be your strategy against the Philippine team?
That's a tough. The Philippines have a couple of different teams and a couple of different styles. The last time I was in the Philippines, I was there with the Wolf Warriors, and we managed to steal a win. And it felt good for me because I got to see all my old pals in the Philippines, and they at least knew that I still knew one or two things about basketball to compete. The Philippines was, at this point, they've really taken exponential steps above other Southeast Asian countries to be the dominant basketball team there. They've got a number of players who are competing overseas. And so I'm not even too sure that you look at it in those terms. You don't look at it as how do I beat the Philippines? I always look at it as how do we get better? And if we get close to where the Philippine team is, I'll decide how we try and knock off a player or two here and there. But at this point, no, the Philippines, in terms of Southeast Asian basketball, are so inundated with talent relative to their competition that I think it's silly to try and figure out how you beat them. Maybe, Thailand's got a couple of good players. Vietnam's gotten better, but still, certainly the Philippines is head and shoulders in terms of talent above the other Southeast Asian countries, in my opinion.
What do you think should the Philippines do to improve its standing in Asia? Well, like what you said, they're head and shoulders above the competition in Southeast Asia. But in Asia, they're trying, they're having a hard time. They're like in the top 5 teams in Asia. And of course, you know what happened in the World Championships. So what do you think should the Philippines do to improve its performance in world basketball?
Yeah, so I feel comfortable telling you this. Just
We are Independent Podcast Network. We are Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate. Would you like to hear your brand while supporting quality podcasts? Contact us now at advertise@guerrillapodcastsyndicate.com.
Coach to coach or man to man is you have to put your pride to the side, and you have too many entities in the Philippines that are pulling the best players in different directions. The Philippines has the talent. The fans have the passion. They've got the coaching skill set there to compete on the highest level. What my understanding has been is that you have different entities pulling the best players in different directions, whether it's toward the national team, whether it's toward a professional team that's owned by one set of owners, or a professional team that's owned by another set of owners. The bottom line is these people I think that have all the influence have to set their pride aside and say, we want the best Philippine players to compete for our country. And we don't give a darn if it means our local or our professional team suffers this year or next year. We want the Philippines to be represented with the best Filipino players. And I think when that happens and you get everyone on board in the same way, there are going to be some other countries that realize the proficiency and skill of Filipino basketball, because it's a whole shitload of talent. It's a whole bunch of passion. And once all those best players and those coaches kind of come together, you're going to have a whole nother level of product that you're putting out against the rest of the world. And I've just seen it sometimes. I think you have a couple players that aren't able to participate here and there, or a coach who doesn't contribute because of some different factions. So if you get those things squared away, sky's the limit, bro.
I see. Now, before we end, I do have some questions, just fast questions. The first that comes to your mind, you just, say it. So who do you consider the best Filipino player right now, aside from Junmar Fajardo?
You took the words out of my mouth. It's gonna be how about I say Jordan Clarkson? Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, he has some blood, So, favorite Sacramento Kings player when you were with the team before?
Francisco Garcia.
Oh.
He's the coolest dude you ever want to meet. Guys don't know about him as much. He controlled the locker room. He was a leader. He was funny. And it's one of those guys that you don't know behind the scenes is really the man. Francisco Garcia.
Favorite coach to match wits with? Favorite coach to, the coach that would, motivate you if you see his name, his team. Oh, I want to,
Let me say, first of all, I loved competing against Tim Cone, who got the best of me. He beat me in a championship series. We both had good teams. I think the world of his ability to coach. And so I enjoyed competing against him and respect him so much. That being said, my favorite guy to compete against is a guy named Kevin Yerkes, because he's my good friend. And we go at each other's throats, and I'm trying to kill him. He's trying to kill me. We'll go have beers afterward and talk some shit to each other. And he's my favorite guy to compete against. Although I want to make sure that your Filipino fans know, in terms of competing against Tim Cone, I knew I was competing against elite level coach.
The PBA player that you had a hard time planning for a defense.
Bo Belga.
Why?
Bo Belga would pick and pop with a hot. We'd have Junmar, and I love June, but Bo Belga would pick and pop to the top of the key, which meant I had to come up with a coverage that could make Junmar show on the pick and roll and get back to Bo. And I swear to God, Bo might have shot 30% against every other team, but I felt like he shot 70% against us from three-point range. He busted our ass, and I hated coaching against him because he'd pick and pop, and he'd hit threes, and it drove me nuts. It was an easy call, bro.
And then he has this tendency, to have this pump fake.
It looked like it was slow motion. He'd get all the way to the rim and lay it up, and it just hurt my feelings. So much respect to Bo Belga and that team, man. He kicked my ass, and I respect it.
Okay, so we have NBA questions here. So, I'm not sure if you have seen this, this meme before. I'll be giving you 3 players. You choose who will you play, who will you bench, who will you cut. Kevin Garnett, Giannis, or Kawhi?
Kevin Garnett,
Giannis, or Kawhi Leonard?
Or Kawhi.
Yeah.
Well, that's tough. But I think Kevin Garnett at this point, he's won championships. He's 7 feet. He's got those leadership type of skills too. So he's going to bring a little more to the table. Kawhi Leonard is a ferocious defensive player, and I love defense. So certainly he ranks up there high. But and he has won a championship. But there was something about Kevin Garnett. Now, one of my best friends who coaches now, his name is Rex Kalamian. He's the head assistant for the Sacramento Kings. He's with the Clippers before that with Doc Rivers, and you'll hear his name, Rex Kalamian, as an NBA head coach here in the next couple of years. And he shared with me some special memories about Kevin Garnett and the type of player that he was, but more than that, the type of man that he was in the locker room and what he did for other players. And so I guess I'm a little bit biased at having him share that with me. I know kind of what Kev did for him, and that means something. Now, Giannis is a hell of a player. They call him the Greek Freak for a reason, but you got to win. You have to win some things before I'm going to go ahead and put you in that corner. So, I'm going to go with guys who've won, and then because I've heard a couple of things, I would slightly say Garnett on that one, brother.
So it would be Garnett play, bench Kawhi, and cut Giannis.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
How about this?
Hey, Hey, so let me tell you, when Kawhi came out, Kawhi was coming out of San Diego State University.
Mm-hmm.
He was a power forward, so he was a straight four-man. He didn't play on the wing in college. We brought him in for a workout when I was in the NBA. We worked him out, and I really misjudged him. I'll be straight with you. I thought, well, he's a four-man who's undersized. Mm-hmm. So he had not shown any ability to play the perimeter the way he does now in pro. Obviously, it appears a guy named Greg Popovich thought that he could and knew more than I did. So, yeah, he ended up doing some things. But at the time, we worked him out. We brought him into Sacramento. I watched him over an NBA workout and thought, well, this guy is a good player, but he just seems like an undersized four, and I'm not too sure he can play the perimeter. I was mistaken, buddy. I was mistaken.
How about this? Russell, Shaq, or Wilt?
Well, yeah, I'm going with Wilt. You can't score 100 points. Yeah. So, yeah, I'll take Wilt. I'll put Shaq on the bench, and I'll cut Russ on that one. And I like Russ. A quick story about Russ is that when I had worked for a coach named Paul Westphal. Westphal. Yeah. So Paul was a mentor to me in the NBA, and he had coached Charles Barkley, Kevin Johnson, and Dan Marley and those guys when they lost to Jordan in the finals.
Yes.
And he was a mentor to me. And so he was someone I really respected. And he had mentioned before that when he coached in college, Russell Westbrook committed to come play for him. I want to say it was Pepperdine or Loyola Marymount. It was a West Coast school, but that's the way the recruiting process works. UCLA had a guy who dropped out at the last minute, and Russ then left Paul Westphal's commitment, went to UCLA instead. I think he made a play with Darren Collison and some real good players, but I remember Paul he was always sore about it because he's like, I almost had an NBA MVP coming to play for me in the Big West Conference, but it didn't quite work out.
Okay. Ray Allen, Reggie Miller, Steph Curry.
Yeah, Steph he's too much, man. He's off the dribble. He almost changed. Yeah, I liked Reggie Miller. He talked a lot of shit that I enjoyed. He'll give it to the fans. He gave the choke to Spike Lee. That was so entertaining. Yeah, and Ray Allen's hit big shots for multiple teams. Whether it was with the Seattle Supersonics back in the day, whether it was the Miami Heat when he hit that shot in the corner. He's done so many things, but I'm a Northern California dude, so Steph Curry's a legend out here, and I think the world of him. I'll tell you another quick story. Is when we brought Steph Curry in for a workout with the Sacramento Kings, we brought him in with a number. Oh yeah, we brought him in with a number of other good guards. We brought a bunch of other good point guards in at the time, and including I believe Tyreek Evans at the time. And Tyreek was too big for those guys, so he was able to kind of use his size to blow to get to the rim and all, and it didn't look as good for Steph Curry at the time. But again, you have to take those individual workouts the way you do with game film with a grain of salt and put them all together. Certainly, Steph Curry was a lot better than we realized during an individual workout, and what an ambassador for basketball he's been. I think the world of him, bro.
I see. So it would be play for Curry. Who will you bench? Who will you cut? Okay.
Yeah, I'm probably cutting Ray Allen on that one.
I
And
see.
that's as good as, and man, I take it back. I think I'd keep Ray Allen and cut Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller would talk some trash to me outside as he left the building, but Ray Allen he's made too many, man. So I'd have to take the verbal abuse from Reggie Miller and cut him, I think.
Okay. How about Karl Malone, Tim Duncan, and Kevin Garnett?
Yeah, Tim Duncan. I'm a big Tim Duncan guy. Not only is he fundamental, but his leadership skills. I'd mentioned KG earlier before some other personal context, but Tim Duncan was someone that I always looked up to at the time.
So it would be play for Tim Duncan. Who will you cut? Who will you bench?
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking on the subscribe button now. This podcast is possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Oh, well, I'll keep Tim. Probably put KG on the bench. But he's not going to be happy about that. Might have to cut KG so I didn't have to listen to him curse me out from the bench. That might be the adjustment I had to make.
Okay. So how about this? You have the point guards. So we have Steph Curry, Steve Nash, Jason Kidd.
Oh, boy, that is tough. I used to watch Jason Kidd when I was a kid. So I'm out here in California. Jason Kidd played up here in Oakland, California. He was the point guard that was dunking on guys. So I watched him. I got a couple years on him, but not too much. I'd watch him in high school just be a monster at the point guard position. So it was really cool. Mm-hmm. That being said, nobody made the game easier for teammates and more fun to watch than Steve Nash, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. He was a nightmare to prepare for in the NBA. He made every player around him better. Those guys who all left the Phoenix Suns teams to go make huge salaries somewhere else all owe a portion of it to Steve Nash, who upped their numbers before they signed those contracts, because those teams used to beat the hell out of us when I was in Sacramento, and Steve Nash was the reason, bro, and he was that good.
So it would be play for Nash. Who will you bench? Who will you cut? Curry or Kidd?
Oh, my word. Torture. I guess to say you'd bench Jason Kidd makes me a fool, but I guess that's what I'd have to say. Yeah. Steph's going to come off the bench and shoot. Yeah. I think that's probably the way I'd go.
Okay. So we have last one. LeBron, Kobe, Michael Jordan.
LeBron James to me, and I know I'm an older dude, so a bunch of old dudes are going to tell me, Coach, you're a real traitor because Jordan was the man and he didn't lose. And I feel him. I really do. But athletes these days get bigger, faster, stronger, more athletic, more knowledgeable. They just do. So while I love Michael Jordan and he was the ultimate competitor, Michael Jordan, I think, was about 6'6", 225.
Yes, 6'6", something like that.
Those are basketball measurements, which means you're 6'5", 215. Yeah. Hey, you know how we like to exaggerate those measurements. Yes. But LeBron James is about 6'8", 270. And I've spoken with players who tried to guard him, who had just told me he's just too big and strong. He's too athletic. So at this point, as big a fan as I was of Michael Jordan, and how do you say a guy who goes 6 for 6 in championships should finish second? I just think today's athlete is better than yesterday's athlete. And LeBron James to me is the ultimate. He can guard all 5 positions. He could play all 5. He could lead the league in assists if he wanted to. Quite frankly, I think if he really put his mind to it and didn't want to score, I think he could lead the league in rebounds. Yes. That's the type of player I think he is. And so, I give the nod to LeBron James. Okay. Hope that doesn't make me a new school guy. I'm old school by nature.
So right now, the NBA has restarted, started last December. Who do you think will win the NBA championship for 2020-2021?
Oh, well, it's going to be tough. The Lakers, I would assume, will go back. And Brooklyn just made a trade. So they've got some real superstars on that team. But I don't think that's how you win it. So I think someone else comes from the East other than Brooklyn, despite their superstars. I think you'll be looking at maybe the Lakers against the Celtics. I look at teams. I think so. Yeah, Celtics are struggling a little bit, but I look at teams who are going to play defense ultimately. I think Brad Stevens is a big defensive coach. I know people talk about Milwaukee. They're certainly talented. They can put up points, but be careful of the teams who lock down on defense in the postseason. It's why the Toronto Raptors won, because the Toronto Raptors had like 5 all defensive guys on their team. And people were surprised when they won. And I was telling my other coaching friends, like, this is no surprise. We can keep saying defense wins championships, but if you don't really believe it, then it is what it is. So when Toronto Raptors had Kawhi Leonard and Serge Ibaka and I'm trying to blank on the point guard's name.
Lowry.
Yeah, Kyle Lowry. You're talking about guys who are the best defensive players in their position. And ultimately, I think that's what gives you an opportunity to win championships, is the defensive side of the ball.
I see. So do you still plan to go to the NBA as part of the coaching staff or front office, or your focus right now in coaching in Southeast Asia?
Sure, yeah, not necessarily to go back to the NBA. I loved my time there. I got to experience everything that coaches do and how it works, and it was a great part of my coaching experience. If I were to go back to the NBA at this point, I would want it to be in a management position, in a scouting position, in a position that actually brings in international players and helps develop it in a global sense for an NBA team. I don't have interest in necessarily coaching in the NBA. I would prefer to do that overseas. So I like being a head coach. I like being able to be in charge of the personnel, because I think that's really important for a head coach, especially overseas. To be in charge of the personnel is a big deal. So my aspirations are to continue to enjoy this ride. And I wish it was a little more specific or direct than that for you, man. But I don't know what the next thing brings. I've been contacted by some other coaches about being the national team head coach on countries I've never been to. So I'm just going to ride the wave as best it can and try and create the relationships that have been beneficial to me in life, because I don't remember the wins and losses nearly as much as I remember the guys that I grinded with.
Okay, so one last question before
Sure.
I give you the message to your supporters. Of course, the basketball is somehow a religion in the Philippines, and of course, they're still dreaming that one day a pure Filipino, full-blooded Filipino will be able to play in the NBA. And of course, right now we do have one in NBA G League, which is Kai Soto. What do you think should Kai do to be able to, to be able to play in the NBA? Because as far as I know, he's standing 7'3", but he has a slim frame, or he's too
Sure.
thin. So what do you think should Kai do to improve or to be able to play in the NBA?
I think you started to hit the nail on the head there, Kiko. Is number one, his frame is too slim. Mm-hmm. He has to commit to a physical sense of the game. Mm-hmm. If you want to be able to compete with guys on the highest level in anything in the world, you better be willing to sacrifice. This is some of the things I talk about with my players, is that sacrifice means doing the shit that you don't want to do. Mm-hmm. So the things that you like are cool to get better. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to become a better player, you got to do the things that you may not enjoy as much. And so he needs to get in the weight room. He needs to get in the weight room. He needs to get his nutrition right. And I think that's part of it. So being 7'3" and skilled like he is wonderful. I say, oh man, man's got some skill and he can do some things. He has to commit to getting his body right, whether he likes it or not. Whether lifting weights makes you feel uncomfortable, whether eating certain types of food you don't care for as much, you have to sacrifice to get your body right. And then I think he has to get his mind right as well. And getting your mind right, if you're going to compete in the NBA or higher level, means almost putting a chip on your shoulder. You need to come in with a mentality that's aggressive, that is unflappable, that I belong here, I'm a professional player, and anyone who's in my way can just catch it. I'll give them 30, I'll hit them in the mouth with an elbow, I'll do what it takes. And so I think, and now that being said, I've seen that mentality in the Philippines. That is not a mentality that's lacking amongst my Filipino friends. These cats love a physical brand of basketball. I remember having conversations with Arwin Santos about physical basketball, and my man was right on the edge. He was up to hit anyone, anywhere, if it meant getting an extra rebound. And I love that about him. I respect that about him. So I think Kai needs to take on a little bit more of that Filipino mentality about what it takes to be grimy, what it takes to be physical, and that will. So those are the two things. He's certainly skilled enough. He's got the size enough. I'd say committing to his nutrition in the weight room, and then more specifically, taking on that Arwin Santos Filipino grimy mentality that says whomever I'm on the court with might get hit in the neck if I have to get a rebound. That's the way guys in the NBA are going to respect him. Even if they're the ones who get hit in the neck, they're going to be the ones that respect him. Because you just can't go in soft, brother. You can't go in expecting anyone to give anything to you. So he needs to come a little thicker, a little more physical, and he needs to call Arwin Santos about some tricks.
So before we end, do you have any message to your supporters, family, and the people who look up to you?
The fact that you'd even say that there was some fans or anyone that looked up to me, I love them with all my heart. I appreciate the Filipino fans so much. They gave me so much love when I was there. That the way I speak about Filipino basketball when I'm talking here in the NBA or other guys here is that anyone here that I talk to knows how much the Filipino people appreciate basketball, compete in it, and it's just a real honor and a pleasure to have ever performed in front of them. And I appreciate you too, man. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on your show, brother.
Thank you so much. So that wraps up another episode of Extra Session. I would like to say thank you to our guest, Coach Todd Purves. I just said we'll talk about 30 minutes, but I think it's about an hour already. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for the time that you gave to us, Coach.
My pleasure. Hey, much love to all the Filipino fans out there. I love you guys, and I appreciate what you bring to basketball. I look forward to seeing you again when I'm there in the ABL and whatever capacity, for sure.
Coach. So in behalf of the Guerrilla Podcast Syndicate Philippines, this has been your host, Kiko Maligdem. And like what I said, games are always exciting when there is Extra Session.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to visit our website at www.guerrillapodcastsyndicate.com, where you can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, rate and review this podcast and share it with your friends. You can also join the conversation with Guerrillas RV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please consider on making a donation to help us keep making the podcast you love. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.